After years of worrying news about the next Spider-Man movie, months of internal problems between Sony and Disney, and the promise of yet another multiverse film with 76 Spider-Man, a new report has rekindled hope in my little fan heart. Yes, Spider-Man! Brand New Day would be a Spider-Man movie focused on street-level action. And no, there shouldn't be any multiverse plot, nor Toby, nor Andrew. And I have to tell you, that fills me with joy. But hold on, because this report comes with a lot of other information. And you know me, my job is to cross-check absolutely all this information to try to give you the most accurate picture of what we know, but also to launch us into a big theory about Spidey, his movie, and his role in the next Avengers films. So hang on, because now we're entering the spoiler zone, the danger zone. You're with Kevin Buchart, the favorite theorist of kids who've already been bitten by a spider trying to become Spider-Man. Opening credits. The reboot of Spider-Man. Spider-Man: No Way Home was a real hit at the box office. With its $2 billion in revenue, it's simply the most profitable film in Sony's history. A success that went a little to the studio's head. Sony did everything to ride this wave and reproduced the formula as quickly as possible. First, by speeding up the production of SSU films. We got Morbius, Madame Web, Venom, The Last Dance, Kraven the Hunter, all that in 3 years, yes, all masterpieces that ended up losing money for the studio. But above all, Sony wanted to quickly launch a new Spider-Man movie, because without an Avengers film, we haven't seen Tom Holland in a Marvel movie since the end of 2021. Tom, for his part, took the opportunity to step away from movies for a while. He focused on other projects, got engaged to Zendaya, worked on his own series The Crowded Room, and even launched his own non-alcoholic beer brand. Yes, Tom Holland hasn't been on the big screen since Uncharted in 2022. But he's making a strong comeback, first in Odyssey, Christopher Nolan's upcoming film, especially in Spider-Man 4, which truly revives the character, and of course his return in the Avengers movies. Because these past few years have allowed everyone, both fans and the studio, to take a step back and ask the real question. Who is this Peter Parker in the MCU? What worked? And most importantly, what didn't work? Between 2017 and 2021, we had a teenage Peter, a high school student dependent on his mentors. First Tony Stark, then Nick Fury, Happy Hogan, Doctor Strange, and finally the other two Spideys. Peter never really had to face the consequences of his actions on his own. And yet that's exactly what defines the character. Let me remind you, with great power
comes great responsibility.
Another point that bothered part of the audience is that Tom Holland plays an MCU Spider-Man and not a classic comic book Spider-Man. In 2015, when everything was ready for The Amazing Spider-Man 3 with Andrew Garfield, Sony negotiated with Disney to bring Spider-Man into the MCU. This meant another reboot. The second reboot in 4 years, Andrew was fired and Tom made his entrance. So this Spidey had to be different. And on that front, they changed everything. There's no Uncle Ben, MJ isn't Mary Jane, but Michelle Jones. Peter doesn't have any of his usual friends, except for a totally revamped Flash. Even Aunt May is young, stylish, and hot. Yes, hot. Peter quickly turns into a tech-focused Spider-Man in Tony Stark's shadow, but he does little in New York. His actions are mainly due to the deal with Sony. A shaky deal that prevents Marvel from freely using the characters and villains from the Spider-Man universe. In other words, almost all of them, and it's even worse in No Way Home. Sony insists on including the other two Spideys, but also their old enemies. So yes, it was epic, no question about that. But it simply deprives the MCU of using the Green Goblin, Oscorp, Octopus, the Lizard, Electro, and so on. And according to the famous rule, which also forbids using the villains from the SSU, we can also cross out Venom, Kraven, Rhino, the Chameleon, and even Morbius. That's half of Spider-Man's villains, so everything needed renegotiation. That's when things got interesting, with various rumors circulating for months. First, Tom Holland is said to have signed a contract for 6 appearances, probably a new Spider-Man trilogy, 2 Avengers movies, and a mystery project. I have my own idea about that, but we'll discuss it later. Before accepting, as a true fan of the character, Tom also reportedly negotiated to be much more involved in the script and production to finally give fans what they've been waiting for. He actually said it in a post on social media. He knows that fans may have been disappointed, but according to him, the work on the new script is absolutely brilliant. That post is from 7 months ago. He even reportedly jumped on the bed with Zendaya when reading the script. On the studio side, we've heard a bit of everything. Sony wanted at all costs to capitalize on No Way Home. Feige, for his part, had placed Spider-Man at the heart of the new saga, but neither of the two studios could agree on which direction to take. Except that the total failure of the Sony Spider-Man universe changed everything. Sony was forced to abandon this universe and officially announce it just as the Kraven movie was released. This cost Palak Patel his job. the executive overseeing Marvel at Sony and responsible for this fiasco. Even now, I can't understand how movies could be that bad. That's when everything restarted. A rumor claims that Disney managed to recover the rights to Spider-Man and his entire universe. Translation: Marvel could now use 100% of the characters from the Spider-Man universe. That's nearly 900 characters. Well, let me clarify, not recovered like those from Fox, but let's say that Sony apparently would agree to let them do their thing and collect the cash from the rights. Well, even if we should take this with a grain of salt, since it's not confirmed, everyone was overjoyed. However, in exchange, Sony would have negotiated one last multiversal movie with lots of Spideys to be released between Doomsday and Secret Wars. A movie mainly intended to fill Sony's coffers, and not necessarily to finally give Peter the fresh start that the end of No Way Home promises us, as a true New York vigilante. In other words, a decision where no one really wins. And that was before the most important report of recent years: Spider-Man 4 will be street level. As I was saying, until now, everyone relied on a report explaining that Spider-Man 4, titled Brand New Day, would be a movie that's half street level, half multiversal. It was specified that the plot would occur alongside the movie Doomsday. But my colleagues and I spent weeks trying to figure out how that could work. A movie split in two, a Spider-Man at the end of the film who wakes up in Battleworld. Honestly, we didn't understand. Especially since if Doomsday takes place in 2028 or 2029 in the MCU, that would mean we just skipped 5 years of Peter's life without knowing anything about what he went through during that time. Because let me remind you that the end of No Way Home takes place at the end of 2024. And let's be honest, that would be a huge waste. But now, the insider, the redacted guy, dropped a huge scoop, as usual, to be taken with a grain of salt. But it's not the first time he's released information that turns out to be accurate, but more importantly, he's backed by Alex Perez from Cosmic Circus, a source I personally consider one of the most reliable. So here's what he's telling us. First, Destin Daniel Cretton, the director of the film, would have agreed to take on Spider-Man 4 on one condition: completely remove the multiverse storyline, and offer a soft reboot of Spider-Man in the MCU that he will develop over a trilogy, and apparently Marvel and Sony agreed. He also reportedly managed to convince Sony to set aside the other multiversal Spideys to reserve them for Secret Wars. As a result, the movie will be much more grounded and, above all, will have real emotional depth. Just that alone is excellent news, and it suggests that Disney may have finally won its standoff. Because not only did Kevin Feige remove John Watts, whose work I've never liked, but he also managed to push through Destin Daniel Cretton, the director of Shang-Chi. And he actually managed to get Sony to drop their idea of making another No Way Home. Which means that the rumors I mentioned earlier about Marvel having regained a lot of control over the character are probably true. And honestly, all of this really makes you want to believe it. At the last CinemaCon, Destin Daniel Cretton went on stage and talked about his attachment to Spider-Man. He said it's been his favorite character since childhood. And listening to him, he and his team are doing everything they can to give us a different Spider-Man, more human, closer to the one from the comics, the one we love. By the way, he tells us that Spider-Man will have a new suit, and that he's working on how to make him swing in the best way possible. Yes, Destin is part of this new generation of directors who are helping Marvel rise. Like Matt Shakman and Jack Schreier, directors of Fantastic Four and Thunderbolt, fresh voices making a real impact. And what sets him apart is that he likes to take risks with framing, and his Shang-Chi is definitely the best directed film since Endgame. It also seems that he brought back Peng Zhang, the fight choreographer from Shang-Chi, and with Tom Holland so far, we really lacked a Spider-Man who's constantly in motion. Anyway, Tom Holland then appeared via video call from the set of The Odyssey and confirmed that this is a whole new beginning. By the way, many people are comparing it to Thor Ragnarok, which completely reworked the character of Thor. He's also the one who revealed the title of the movie, Brand New Day. So this new movie will indeed be a soft reboot, and honestly, it makes total sense. A brand new Spider-Man. You know as well as I do, if the MCU is having trouble attracting new fans today, it's because it's become almost impossible for a new viewer to follow. Even jumping in partway is complicated. There are too many characters, too much backstory, and if you have to rewatch everything from the beginning, well, it's simple. I did the math. With all the multiverse branches, it would take 444 hours. That's 18 days straight, no eating or sleeping. As Kevin Feige says, keeping up with the MCU now feels like homework, like your first year of med school. That's exactly why, since getting back the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, they're preparing with Secret Wars, a soft reboot of the MCU. But what is a soft reboot? It's simply keeping what you want to keep and getting rid of what doesn't matter anymore, by launching new stories that won't really take into account what happened before. Nothing is deleted, we just make it so that you don't need to have seen what happened before, since each character is starting a whole new chapter. In Secret Wars, the end of the multiverse will lead to the creation of a new universe where all the survivors of the multiverse who will be chosen will be brought together. A world where, normally, no one will remember the events of Secret Wars anymore, except maybe a few. The goal, to start over with a new foundation, but this time with all the available Marvel characters. So, with the X-Men, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, basically everyone. And Spider-Man won't escape this reset. The first proof is the movie's title, Brand New Day. I covered this in my previous video. It directly references a comic arc where Peter and MJ forget their love, Peter reconnects with old childhood friends, and the character gets a soft reboot. An event that, at the time, really divided the fans, since it reset 20 years of history. But here, it's no coincidence. The title is very clear about its intentions. But above all, unlike other Marvel sequels, the goal of this fourth film isn't to have him recover what he lost in No Way Home, but to completely move the character forward. The fans spoke, and Marvel listened. And today, the plan is to give us the Spider-Man we deserve, and all of this is totally consistent with the studio's overall strategy. The Russo brothers themselves explained that, unlike Endgame, which was a conclusion, the Doomsday and Secret Wars movies will actually be a beginning. And yeah, it's a bit of a strange concept at first, but honestly, not really. Because yes, the MCU has become hard to digest. And just like in the comics, every 10 to 20 years, it's time to create a new entry point. And this new beginning will be built around 4 key movies: The Fantastic Four, Avengers Doomsday, Spider-Man Brand New Day, and finally, Secret Wars. These 4 movies will truly launch the new MCU for a whole new generation. By the way, Bob Iger said it himself. With the Fantastic Four, we're entering the best era fans have ever known, an event that will mark the genre and create a real passing of the torch between 2 generations. Ours, the one that saw everything, and the next one, who'll start their marathon here and not with Iron Man 1. A bit like our parents who discovered the golden age or the silver age of comics, and us who came along in the 90s or the 2000s, it's simply the logical next step. So, to sum up, the first 3 Spider-Man movies will be considered a prequel, the story of his teenage years in the old world. But now it's time to tell the story of a new Spider-Man. More mature, more solitary, more of a fighter. What do we know about Brand New Day? Filming for the movie starts this summer with a release set for July 29, 2026. No need to panic. Marvel now typically films a year before release. While few details have leaked so far, some information is confirmed. First, Zendaya and Jacob Batalon will be back. And their appearance should be brief, probably to remind Peter of his current loneliness. We also know that J.K. Simmons is reprising his iconic role as J. Jonah Jameson. Since it's been years since Peter's last appearance, we're all hoping to finally see him doing odd jobs as a photographer for the Daily Bugle. It's about time. As for new faces, we also note Liza Colón-Zayas, seen in The Bear. Her role hasn't been revealed yet, but her profile suggests she could start introducing the Morales family. Liza, like Rio Morales, is of Puerto Rican origin, and normally there's very little chance we'll see Max Morales in this movie. According to insider The Reactive Guy, Sony won't let go of the character until after the release of Beyond the Spider-Verse, so after Secret Wars. Another addition to the cast is Sadie Sink, who broke out in Stranger Things. Her role also hasn't been revealed yet, but personally, I think Sadie is here to stay. Marvel often hires promising young talent who are affordable and can stay long-term. That's how Chris Hemsworth, Evans, or Downey Jr. went from small paychecks to star salaries. When you look at the new Avengers, only Sebastian Stan and Florence Pugh are really top tier, the rest aren't. Same for the Fantastic Four, where they announced Margot Robbie and Adam Driver, but we ended up with Vanessa Kirby, Pedro Pascal, and Joseph Quinn. Great actors, of course, but still affordable. So, in my opinion, it's the same strategy with Sadie Sink. And even though she's a redhead and therefore perfect to play MJ, I don't think for a second that Marvel will introduce a new MJ right away. That would be weird, not right after Zendaya, so the most likely option would be for her to play Gwen Stacy, Peter's love interest in college. And being a redhead has never stopped anyone from playing Gwen. Bryce Dallas Howard and Emma Stone, both redheads. But what really makes me lean toward Gwen is the film's production name. Every Marvel movie has a production code name, often related to the plot. Doomsday, for example, is called For All Time, in reference to Doom's potential plan to join the TVA. Here, the production name is Blue Oasis, a clear reference to the Spider-Man Blue comic. A comic that is an ode to the love Peter still feels for Gwen, his ex-fiancée killed by the Green Goblin, so yes, it's very likely her. And who knows, this choice could even pave the way for Spider-Gwen in Battleworld. But please, Marvel, don't make her die again. I'm not a butcher. And what about the villains? There's a 99% chance the main villain of the movie will be Mr. Negative. Still, according to The Reacted Guy, the actor Daniel Wu is the frontrunner for the role. For his part, Alex Perez mentions two other female antagonists. One is a dark and mysterious woman, and the other has a techno-shinobi look, kind of cyberpunk style. The costume team is clearly drawing much inspiration from Asian culture. Reimagined kimono, tactical outfit, 17th century samurai armor, but reworked Jedi style in a semi-futuristic way. We understand that Daniel Destin Cretton is going to bring a lot of Asian elements to this Spider-Man, just like he did in Shang-Chi, but we'll come back to that in a moment. By the way, the Reacted Guy points out that the movie could be connected to Shang-Chi in one way or another, and include references to Daredevil or Born Again. That would help lay the groundwork for the new street-level arc of the MCU. Because let me remind you, this movie isn't a conclusion, but rather a new beginning. If we put all the information together, what does it tell us? Well, that Mr. Negative would be the main threat, and that the mysterious shinobi could be Wraith, also known as Yuri Watanabe. And if you've played the Spider-Man game, you know her, a New York police captain of Japanese descent who steals gear from Mysterio and becomes a masked vigilante. In the comics, she's connected to the downfall of Mr. Negative. So yeah, we can say that the movie could draw inspiration from the video game, which is pretty funny since it's actually Tom Holland's Spidey who inspired the one in the game. And then there's this mysterious, shadowy woman. But then, what's next? Not multiversal, but still. Right now, the filming of Avengers Doomsday is in full swing. A massive shoot with almost daily leaks and rumors everywhere. We're talking about dozens of characters and just as many theories. But I'm not going to lie to you, something is really bothering me. Because Spider-Man 4 comes out right after, scheduled for July 2026. It's the third film of Phase 6. Right after Doomsday, and just before Secret Wars, expected in May 2027. But there's something strange, a Marvel slot in November 2026 that's still open and untitled. It's the only slot that hasn't been cancelled, and it's still there. And for a long time, I speculated a lot. Is it a Hulk movie, a Doctor Strange 3 movie, a Shang-Chi 2? What if the answer is all three at once? Let me explain. Tom Holland can't be on the set of Doomsday, but he'll definitely appear in Secret Wars. So, if Spider-Man 4 isn't multiversal, what exactly does it bring between Doomsday and Secret Wars? Remember, between Infinity War and Endgame, Captain Marvel and Ant-Man and the Wasp introduced key elements for the success of the time heist. But here, what's the point of telling us about a struggling Peter just to send him straight to Battleworld, where Doom is already God? And let's be serious, can you imagine a Doom with Tony Stark's face without any interaction with Peter Parker? No, me neither. Especially since we know that Tom Holland's stunt double has been confirmed on the set of Doomsday, so Spidey should at least be somewhat present. And then a theory hit me, and since then I can't get it out of my head. Avengers Doomsday would be in two parts. Originally, the Russo brothers wanted to make Infinity War in 2 movies. They eventually decided to make Endgame. But I feel like now they're itching to go back to that structure and make a mega trilogy. Honestly, there's just too much content announced for a single movie. Between the fight against the X-Men, the Dark Avengers, the incursions, the connection with the New Avengers, and the Young Avengers. Doom's entire story, his introduction as a good guy, under the guise of Iron Man, what Doctor Strange is doing during this time, the story of the TVA, then his quest to steal divine powers and create Battleworld. But how long is this movie actually going to last? It's impossible, we can agree on that. It's really bothering me, and I'll explain everything in next week's video. Make sure to subscribe because the upcoming weeks will be intense. But now, let's get back to our Spider-Man. With a 2-part Doomsday, everything becomes clearer. Spider-Man 4 would then be almost absent from the first part. Maybe a small appearance at the end of the movie, like a teaser. As for his movie, it would show us Peter's solo journey, a Peter who has lost everything and is trying to rebuild himself. We'd see his future begin in it. Gwen, the Morales family, his job with the Daily Bugle, a real Spider-Man movie, street level, down to earth. He would team up with Yuriko Watanabe, an NYPD captain, kind of like a duo similar to Batman and Commissioner Gordon. Together, they investigate a new Chinese mafia arriving in New York, led by Mr. Negative. So far, it's classic. But do you remember that mysterious woman in samurai armor? Many insiders think she could be the Spider Queen. And she could connect Spider-Man to the multiverse. In the comics, during the Spider Island event, the Jackal and the Queen spread a virus in New York that gives all the residents Spider-Man's powers. So at first, everyone loves it, they're happy, they're playing superheroes, but quickly, the side effects turn them into giant, monstrous insects. And the Queen's plan is to be able to control them all and make them her army thanks to her powers. Peter ends up merging with the symbiote to resist the Queen and defeat her, and that's why it's interesting. Spider Island is one of the zones of Battleworld in Secret Wars. It's also one of the first levels in the game Marvel Rivals. A level that's not New York, but a futuristic Tokyo. You see where I'm going. So I think a partial adaptation of this run is possible, with cameos like Shang-Chi or Daredevil. That would explain the idea of having retro-futuristic samurai outfits with a cyberpunk style, since the movie could end in a kind of Asian spider island within Battle World. And let me remind you that when the concept art leaked, we saw that in the Battle World, there would be several designs, all a bit old-fashioned, including a world similar to Game of Thrones. Spider Island may have its own universe. One last thing connects the Spider Queen to Destin Daniel Cretton. I told you that he would probably include East Asian mythology in the movie, just like he did in Shang-Chi. And the Spider Queen has a lot in common with the Yao Guai, creatures from Chinese folklore, which can be found especially in the video game Black Myth Wukong. Spider spirits, who take the appearance of attractive young women before turning into devouring monsters, just like a certain queen in the comics. And she could very well be brought in from a collapsing reality, which would explain their presence in Peter's world and their connection to the end of the multiverse. And she could, why not, end up being one of Doom's barons in this battle world, in that famous Spider Island. In short, this Spider-Man Brand New Day could turn out to be a huge surprise. A grounded film with impactful fights, real direction, and a deep evolution of Peter's character. All of this leading to a fantastic conclusion that would send us straight into Doomsday Part 2. Yes, you better believe it, where Peter and his symbiote could team up with Doom. Yes, you heard right, because I think this would be the perfect movie to introduce the symbiote. A symbiote that first appeared in the original Secret Wars run. A symbiote needed to fight the Spider Queen's powers that could also affect his judgment in choosing allies. Let me know in the comments what you think. Stay curious, that's the secret to happiness. Bye.